How can you invest in property as a Muslim in the US without going to the banks and using interest loans? Guys, welcome to this video. Today we're going to talk about 3 different strategies you can use to invest in property without going through the banks nor using what we call interest. Obviously in Islam is considered, haram. A lot of my audience that are Muslims, whether you be from West Africa, Morocco, I get all this question all the time. And so there's 3 different strategies here in the US you can use to invest in property without having to go through the bank, take a loan, and pay interest on it. And I can understand how that can be a burden. I felt it myself my first year investing in real estate here in the US, right? Obviously, my name is Mamadou Diallo and I invest in real estate here in the US. I'm in the US market. I'm not in UK. I'm not in Africa. So I'm going to focus on talking about strategies that I myself have applied, and some of them I know people that have applied it here in the US. So one of those first strategies that we're going to talk about is what is called a rental arbitrage, right? Rental arbitrage is basically you just finding a distressed landlord, as I like to call it. So let's say, for example, I have a home and, I renovated it and I put it on the market for rent. It could be an apartment building, it could be a 2-unit, it could be a single family, it could be a condo. It really doesn't matter. I list it on the market for rent, but it stays on the market for longer than I like. So let's say, for example, I list my apartment building and it stays on the market for, 90 days over, and it still haven't been rented. So now I have vacant units that are not bringing me money, but it's taking money out of my pockets. One of the strategies that I've seen people do, I personally don't like this strategy, but this is the first strategy you can apply, is I've seen investors call these landlords and are able to convince them. Obviously, you have to create an LLC. You don't want to do this on your personal name. You call them and you convince them to basically lease it to you. And what you do is you take the property, so you're leasing it with your company name, your LLC name, and then you sublease it to whatever. It could be you want to do Airbnb. It could be you want to do midterm rentals. This here in the US is when we rent it to traveling nurses. It could be that you want to do what we call crash pads. It could be that you want to do co-living. Really doesn't matter, but co-living is when you rent the property by the room, right? I have houses like that in Georgia. So you call the landlord and you say, hey, listen, I know you have your property right now listed on the market. I see it on the market. You can find these listings on Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com. You call them, you say, hey, I seen your property being on the market for about 90 days and is not yet rented. What I can do is I see you have it, for example, rented for $1,500. I'll offer you $200 more. So I'll pay you $1,700 per month. My company will pay you $1,700 per month. And then I want to have what is called a commercial lease. So here you're not having a tenant and a landlord lease. What you're doing is you're having what is called a commercial lease, which is a way longer lease. Typically, if you're renting as an individual, meaning is me, Mamadou Diallo, going and renting the property on my name, the lease varies. Is either you're doing a month-to-month lease base or you're doing 12 months lease base. When it comes to a commercial lease, you're doing at least 3 years to 5 years. So that's what you want. And the reason for that is because, remember, if you're leasing the property and then you're turning around and subleasing it, Airbnb and all these other buy and hold different strategies, you don't want your landlord to wake up in 6 months or 12 months and go, hey, and this is after you spent your money, furnish the property, design the property, whatever, right? Depending the exit strategy you choose, and go, you know what, I've changed my mind. I want my property back, because you only had a 12-month lease. So you want a longer lease, 3 to 5 years. And then the reason you offer also a little bit more than what they have it listed for. Now, if you can negotiate, if you're a great negotiator, you really don't have to offer them more than what they have it listed for, because the landlord, what he wants is what? To stop bleeding with an empty property. That's basically what he wants. He probably has a mortgage. He's paying taxes, the property upkeep, you name it. So if you can go in and do your, due diligence on the property, the area, the location, and then you realize, if I take this property right now and I list it on Airbnb.com, I can probably bring about 7,500, you name it, right? Within that range, well, I can offer $200 more to this landlord or $300 more. And the reason for that is because my exit strategy allows me to make way more money than I'm offering the landlord. In this scenario, because you're not going to buy the property, you're not taking over title, your company, your LLC is the tenant. You're having a commercial lease of 3 to 5 years. The only capital you have to bring to the table, obviously, is to furnish the property, design the property, depending on your exit strategy. There are certain strategies that don't require furnishing and designing, but if you're doing Airbnb, midterm rentals, and here in the US, one of the strategies that I've done that even pays better than Airbnb guests is what we call insurance misplaced tenants. This is when, you have somebody who owns a home and then the home catches fire, and then his insurance or her insurance is looking for a place for that person to stay. Within the meantime, they're repairing the property or rebuilding it. Well, these insurance companies actually pays way more than Airbnb guests. So that's one of the ways. And the downside to this strategy is what? The downside is obviously you don't own the property. So on the longer term, you have to keep recycling and recycling and recycling because you're just a tenant. So you're leasing it from somebody and then you're doing what is called a sublease. There is a lot of apartment buildings. Like right now I'm in Dallas, Texas. There's a bunch of them around me where you can book an Airbnb and you can literally go on the county website or applications like PropWire and see that the person, the host that is hosting you as an Airbnb guest is not the owner or record of the property. That means that person is doing what is called the arbitrage model. So that's one of the ways you can do it. Obviously at that point you have to have cash, whether that be your own money or your uncle's money, giving you the money for the design and furnishing it and giving the landlord, obviously you always got to give something up front. So you always got to pay like first month and last month or things like that, depending how the landlord want the lease to be set up. But in a nutshell, that's how you can, invest in property anywhere actually where you at. Because I know this works in the UK, I know this works in Africa, I know this works in Dubai. So you can do arbitrage models everywhere, right? The second thing is what? You can invest passively. So if you're a high earner as a Muslim, you're earning 6 figures or more with your 9 to 5. Maybe you're a dentist, maybe you're a physician, or whatever fields you work in, and you want to invest in property, but you're too busy with your 9 to 5, but also you don't want to go through the banks and get a loan and start paying interest to invest in property, but also maybe you don't want to be hands-on. You don't want to be an operator and deal with the day-to-day of getting the calls, toilet leaks, you name it, termites. Now you got to renovate the property, deal with tenant headaches, deal with vacancies, deal with evictions. What you can do is there is something called a fund, and I have a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, who created this. A fund is essentially a vehicle that allows you to invest with them in multifamily buildings like 100 units plus, right? And what you guys are really doing now, this strategy here is something I personally like, because actually they go in and buy all these buildings in the red states. They buy all these buildings absolutely cash, right? So it's a bunch of investors coming together, putting cash together, and then going and buying these buildings absolutely cash and use no banks whatsoever. This is called the fund model. So you can invest passively with her through that fund. They do all the operating, they deal with the day-to-day, they do all the acquisition, they find the buildings, they deal with the renovations, they deal with the headaches. All you're doing is injecting your cash, obviously, and then you're getting a return passively. But guess what? Is a profit split, is the equity split model. So everybody owns the building together, right? This is a fund model. You should research that. And if you need information to contact my best friend that is doing this also, I'll be more than happy to put their description below. Going back to the strategy that I just mentioned, by the way, you need about $75,000 at least to invest. And it has to be capital that you don't need to live on. It cannot be your emergency fund. It cannot be money that you need in 2 weeks for your son or your daughter's wedding. It has to be excess cash that you have laying down doing nothing. Now, for those of you that have been in the US for years, maybe you have a 9 to 5 and you've worked for multiple different companies. You guys know there is something called 401ks here in the US. For those of you that don't know, obviously I'm not a financial advisor. Consult with your own professional, but you can use your 401k, turn it into a self-directed IRA, take that capital yourself, take control of it, obviously through a middleman, right? It's like an attorney, and then you can invest in something like a fund with your 401k money and don't pay taxes, right? But you have to turn it first into a self-directed IRA to do that. If you're a 6-figure plus earner, you have to be an accredited investor. Research the term. You have to be an accredited investor in order to invest in this kind of fund. Now, when it comes to the third option, I've done this personally. Here in the US, when it comes to the data of homeowners, everything is public. In the US, there is no such thing as, privacy. So you can drive in front of somebody's property, pull up an application like PropWire, PropStream, you name it, LandGlide, that costs you maybe $99 a month, and you can pull up the information and see who the owner is, when did they buy the property, how much did they buy it for, but you can also see if that homeowner is in distress. Is this homeowner about to lose their home? Is this homeowner going through through a divorce. Let's say is this homeowner just inherited the property, what we call probates. Oftentimes people that inherit properties from their families, statistically here in the US, most of those people actually sells these properties within the 90 days of them inheriting these properties. And the reason for that is because a lot of people that inherit properties, they actually don't just inherit properties, they inherit problems, because the person that passed away maybe didn't pay their property taxes for a couple of years. So now you have to, cash that, right? But some of these people that have passed away have owned these properties for 30 years plus. So they have zero loans on these properties. I've done this in the state of Florida, where you can call these homeowners because the data is public, and then you can go to websites like truepeoplesearch.com and you can find the number of the homeowner, and then you can see their family tree and you can contact the family members and see, hey, who is currently the personal representative on this property, right? That's a whole different video for another day. You guys can check out my playlist on pre-foreclosures. You can check out my playlist on wholesaling real estate, right? So you can call these people and then negotiate with them directly. And what you can do is a strategy called owner finance. Owner finance is if you're talking to a homeowner who owns the home, it doesn't matter if they bought it or inherited it, but they don't have a loan on the property. They don't owe the bank. Maybe they've owned it for 30 years, 20 years plus, 15 years plus. Because they don't have a loan, obviously they have 100% equity on the property. And if you're able to convince them that, hey, will you be my bank? Most people that are, the slightest financially educated understands that if you sell a property cash, there's too many taxes that comes with it. So you pay, if you list the property, you have about 6 to 8% on commissions and closing fees. And then after that, you have Uncle Sam coming for their cut. By the time you're done, you're walking away with pennies, right? So the smart people, if you're able to convince them to, so let's say hypothetically, somebody wants to sell their property for $500,000, right? But because you've explained to them all the expenses that comes with it, and then the taxes that they might have to pay on those profits after they pay all the expenses to actually sell the home, if you're able to offer them that full $500,000 on paper, are they willing to let you upgrade them to your bank? And at that point, it's just a matter of negotiation, because remember, there is no bank in between you guys, there is no appraisals, there is no inspections, right? So you are directly negotiating with the homeowner. So whatever you guys agree and put on paper and sign, it is absolutely legal. That's called owner finance. So if you're able to convince them that, hey, listen, I'll give you the $500,000, and technically I'm overpaying for the property, because if you were to list it with a realtor on the market, you would pay your commissions, your closing costs, then taxes. So $500,000 on paper, technically I'm already paying you way over than what you would walk away with. That's number one. Number two, are you able to maybe do very little down, right? I've done properties side by side in Florida where I gave the homeowner, and this landlord was from the UK, so he had two duplexes side by side. When I negotiated with him, he absolutely didn't need the money. He just didn't want to deal with the property anymore. He didn't want to deal with toilet leaks. He didn't want to deal with tenants. So I told him, listen, because you don't need the money, what I'll do is I'll give you a little bit down. I'll give you a full asking price on paper, so you don't have to pay all these fees. And then every single month, I'll send you a payment. But because I'm overpaying a little bit, I want to do a 0% interest deal. And he said yes. It took me 4 to 7 calls back to back, talking to this guy over and over, building rapport, obviously knowing him, knowing what his pain points are, what his motivations are, to be able to convince him to do that. But we ended up doing the deal. So you have thousands of transactions on a daily basis here in the US where people buy properties, owner finance at 0% all day, every day. If you're just able to, get out of your fear of getting on the phone and dialing a stranger and talking to them about their property, you may land on deals like that, right? So if somebody who owns a home free and clear finance it to you on paper at 0%, they become your bank, and then you negotiate terms like 10, 15, 20, 30 years, regardless of what terms you negotiate. Well, guess what? You just got yourself a home with no interest whatsoever. You don't have to go through the bank. Your bank is the landlord you negotiated with. And most people that will sell you these homes don't even know that if something happens to them, because you're gonna, land a lot of elderly type of sellers. Well, they don't even understand that if they pass away, you're gonna have to explain to them this. But if something happens to them, let's say they get abducted and they leave this earth, knock on wood, well, whoever inherit their estate will inherit the cash flow as well. Most people don't know that, right? So it's not, because a lot of their fear is like, okay, so Mamadou, if I finance you the home, I'm already, over my 60s, I don't have many years left. What happens if something happens to me? Well, whoever inherit your estate will inherit the same terms that you gave me, and they will keep collecting that cash flow, so you can keep this cash flow for generations within your family, but they don't have to deal with all the headaches that comes with owning the building, right? So they become your bank, you transfer title, you own the property, they're just your bank, you keep making payments. And so guys, these are the 3 different different strategies you can apply in any market, depending where you are, the kind of finances you already have, savings, or maybe you have an uncle who's rich can give you the money to do this. But you can do these 3 different strategies: invest in property, invest in real estate without ever going to Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and take loans and pay interest on it. All right, guys, smash the like button if you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you learned anything new today. Not only that, let me know if you're already doing any of these strategies, or is there any of these that you would love to try. Let me know in the comments, guys. I'll see you guys in the next video. Boom, boom, boom.